will come to order. The Pledge of Allegiance this morning will be led by Terry Boykin from McAuliffe International Middle School in Denver.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Kohler, please take the roll.
Representatives Becker, Buck, Buckner, Conti, Coram, Court. Representative Court. Present. DELGROSSO. Dorr. Dorr is present. Duran. Everett. Exum. Fields. Fisher. Foote. Garcia. Gardner. Representative Gardner. Absent. Giroux. Janal. Hamner. Holbert. Just present. Hollinghorst. Representative Hollinghorst. Excused. Humphrey. Joshi. Kagan. Krafttharp. Labuda. Landgraf. Lawrence. Present. Lebsock. Representative Lebsock. Absent. Lee. May. McCann. McLaughlin. McNulty is excused. Melton. Representative Melton. Mitch Bush. Moreno. Murray. Representative Murray. Representative Hollinghorst is present. Representative Murray is present. Navarro. Representative Navarro. Present. Nordberg. Pabon. Peniston. Pedersen. Primavera. Priola is excused. Rankin. Rosenthal. Ryden. Sane, excused. Salazar. Schaefer. Scott. Singer. Representative Lebsock is present. Representative Gardner is present. Singer excused. Sonnenberg. Stevens is excused. Swam. Zabo. Tyler. Vigil. Representative Singer is present. Waller. Representative Waller. Not yet. Representative Waller. Williams. Wilson. Wright. Young. Speaker Ferrandino.
Have you had a chance to read it? Do you have any concerns about it? Okay. Is there any opposition? I've not heard anything. We'll see what happens today. CL's okay with it.
And I discussed it with members.
Or excused? Okay. Any more? Okay. Well, I think
No, he's just excused.
yeah, well, let's be clear. They can't fire this person.
With 61 members present, 4 excused, a quorum is present. Representative Nordberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the reading of the Journal of Wednesday, January 29th be dispensed with and is approved and corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You've heard the motion. Is there any discussion? Is there any substitute motions? Any? Going once, going twice. You've all heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Representative Nordberg, I didn't even ask for the noes. Representative Nordberg, you have to at least vote aye on your own motion. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today is the Colorado Nonprofit Association is hosting the 2014 Nonprofit Day at the Capitol. Nonprofit leaders are here today to learn about how they can best work with their legislators. Many of them will be taking time today to meet with us, so let's give them a warm welcome to those leaders who are up in the gallery this morning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Wright. Are we doing both together? Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning.
Morning.
Members, it's a joy and a pleasure for us today to introduce some of the finest culinary students I've ever seen from Grand Junction, Colorado. They were the ones that had the yogurt and everything over here by the Supreme Court. That was an awesome, awesome breakfast this morning. We have a whole group of them along here, along with their professor, Wayne Smith. Would you please stand up? Thank you. We would also like to welcome two trustees today that have joined us from Colorado Mesa University. We have Ray Martinez from Fort Collins, and we have Doug Quimby also, wherever Doug's at. Thank you for being here.
Representative Scott, that'll be $4. And I thought it was Foster University, not Colorado Mesa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not done getting fines yet.
Okay.
All right,
well,
thank you, sir.
They go up exponentially. Just warning you.
I know. I'm in deep now, and Representative Wright is here because he had extra cash. Well, I also want to give you a quick reminder today that we have a free lunch sponsored by CMU. It's our annual legislative lunch. It will be at the History Colorado today at 12 noon. It's only at 12th and Broadway, so we can all get a nice little walk. And there is a reminder on your desk for that lunch, and we'd really, really appreciate having you all there. And President Foster has a list, and he's checking it twice. Thank you.
Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to add my appreciation to all of those from CMU. We also had some student athletes that came over today. Vice President Derek Wagner is on the floor this morning, and I know Tim Foster is around here somewhere. As an alum of then Mesa State College, I can't tell you how much that campus has grown, and that's due to the fine leadership that we have on that campus. So thank you so much for being here today, guys.
Representative Wright, that'll be $2. Foster doesn't get you fined. He's a former member. Representative Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make an introduction today of Rennie Fagan, who is up there in the gallery. He's the president of the Colorado Nonprofit Association. He used to be a constituent of mine, is now, no, I moved, he didn't move. But the reason I'm not going to get a fine on this one is that Rennie Fagan was Representative Fagan from Colorado Springs about a half century ago. So welcome, Rennie.
Representative McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to remind you members that there is a lunch today sponsored by the Colorado Health Institute. And it will be a good one to attend because the topic is the Affordable Care Act, your constituents' top 5 questions. So they're going to talk about questions you might be getting from your constituents and give you the answers. So that's in Senate Room 356, and that's also a free lunch at noon today. Second announcement is members of the Health Insurance Exchange Oversight Committee. Reminder, we are meeting tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in room 112 for a presentation from the Connect for Health, the Colorado Health Insurance Exchange. So that's 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hey, caffeine addicts. Only 7 of you have paid your $20. We owed a bill for coffee of $290 yesterday. If you don't pay your $20 each, there won't be any more coffee. Now, I know that doesn't please many of you. So if you have not paid your $20, please see Kathy, where she's over in the assignable room over here, and get her your $20 or the coffee will dry up. Thank you.
Representative Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a reminder, the Behavioral Health Caucus will have a lunch today from 12 to 1 in room 112. The key topic is key behavioral health initiatives in 2014. Please join me, and I look forward to seeing you.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a group of people here on the floor today, and they do wonderful work in Boulder County. They are all activists and volunteers with the Boulder County Community Foundation. They do tremendous service, including they've done a tremendous amount of work relative to the flood. So I'd like them to stand up and be recognized, and thank you for being here.
Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I need to call the Capitol Choir down to the well. And actually, after yesterday's singing in recognition of Pete Seeger, we got some criticism about how we did. So I really need our shining stars of the Capitol Choir here to read, well, and you too, Representative Singer, to redeem ourselves from yesterday. But we do have a birthday in the House today. And dressed in a gorgeous blue dress. It's Representative Buck's birthday today. So if I could get the Capitol Choir down here, please. Where are you? We might have a Capitol solo here today if we don't get our choir.
Trio,
so please join me in wishing Representative Buck a very happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Representative Buck. Happy birthday to you.
Further announcements and introductions. Seeing none, we'll proceed to our next order of business, third reading of bills, final passage. Members, please return to your desks. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1050.
House Bill 1050 by Representative Kagan, all Senator Guzman, concerning increase in the number of judges for the 18th Judicial District in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1050 on third reading and final passage.
You've heard the motion. Members, this does take 2/3 vote of the chamber to pass. The question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1050 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives Pedersen, Rosenthal, Schaefer, Tyler, Vigil, Wilson. Representatives Pedersen, Rosenthal, Schaefer, and Tyler. Representative Tyler, that'll be $5. 5. Close the machine. With 58 aye votes, 4 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1050 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Cole, please read the title of House Bill 1077.
House Bill 1077, Representative Jarrell to Senator Hodge, concerning increase in the statutory cap on the 2-year average of the unobligated portion of the Oil and Gas Conservation Environmental Response Fund.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1077 on third reading and final passage.
You've heard the motion. Seeing no discussion, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1077 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative, close the machine. With 45 aye votes, 17 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1077 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1092.
House Bill 1092, Representative V. Hall, Senator Cafalas, concerning the voluntary contribution designation benefiting the Colorado Youth Conservation Corps fund that appears on state individual income tax return forms.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1092 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1092 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine. Members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 53 aye votes, 9 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1092 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1035.
House Bill 1035, Representative Gardner, Senator Johnston, concerning collection and restitution ordered pursuant to a deferred judgment.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1035 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1035 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative McLaughlin. Close the machine. With 62 aye votes, 0 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1035 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1086.
House Bill 1086 by Representative Murray, also Senator Jones, concerning a requirement that a legal notice published in newspapers also published on a statewide website maintained by a majority of Colorado newspapers.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1086 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1086 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative McLaughlin. Close the machine. With 55 aye votes, 7 people stuck in last generation, 3 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1086 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1081.
House Bill 1081, Representatives Fisher and Zabel, Senator Baumgartner, concerning the Motor Carrier Safety Fund in connection with creating the fund, transferring money from the Hazardous Materials Safety Fund to the Motor Carrier Safety Fund, and specifying that any excess uncommitted reserves in the Public Utilities Commission Motor Carrier Fund be transferred to the Motor Carrier Safety Fund.
Very nicely done, Mr. Kohler. That was your best one this year. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1081 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1081 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members, do your job. Representatives May, Williams. Close the machine. With 62 aye votes, 0 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1081 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. We'll proceed to our next order of business, general orders, second reading of bills. Representative Moreno.
Speaker, I move the House now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of general order.
You've heard the motion. Seeing no objection, the House will resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole for consideration of general orders. Representative Moreno will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there is a request for reading a bill at length. Committee amendments will not be read unless requested, as they are printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads and not read unless requested. Bills will be laid over upon motion of the majority leader. The coat roll is relaxed. Mr. Kohler, will you please read the title to House Bill 1005?
House Bill 1005 by Representative Sonnenberg and Young, also Senator Lundberg, concerning clarification of the requirements applicable to a change point of water division.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1005 and the committee report of Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources.
To the Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The change that was made in the Ag Committee was simply to align this bill with current water practices, and so I asked for your aye vote on the committee report amendment.
Is there any further discussion on the Agriculture Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of the committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The Agriculture Committee report is passed. Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under current law, when a channel or of a stream changes so that the ditch head gate no longer receives a sufficient flow of water, the ditch owner is authorized to move the head gate upstream without filing a change of water right application. This bill, and it was recommended unanimously by Flood Committee, clarifies that if a ditch owner relocates a head gate to a new surface point of diversion, as long as the relocation does not physically interfere with the complete use or the enjoyment of other water rights, the owner does not need to file a change of water right application.
Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, the intent of this bill very simply is to deal with flood issues in which, as many of you know, a river changed channels or became deeper. And normally in this process, you would have to go to court through a change of point of diversion. What this bill does is says, you know what? You can start doing that now so agriculture can get on the stick, actually rebuild those head gates. Cities can rebuild those head gates so that we can utilize that infrastructure before we have a spring runoff. So I would ask for your yes vote.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, when we toured the northern Colorado flood damaged and impacted areas, we discovered that there were numerous, over 200 diversion projects that were damaged or destroyed in that process. And agriculture needs a streamlined, I hate to use the pun, but a streamlined process to make sure that we get these diversions back in operation in a timely fashion for spring growing season. So I urge your aye vote on this bill.
Is there further discussion on House Bill 1005? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1005. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 1005 passes. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1164.
House Bill 1164, Representatives Holinghorst and Murray, also Senator Ulibarri, concerning nonpartisan elections not courted by a county clerk and recorder in connection with creating the Colorado Local Government Election Code for the conduct of such elections by such districts, harmonizing residency requirements for voter registration, modifying the Colorado Municipal Election Code 1965, and clarifying when elections are coordinated by county clerk and recorders.
Madam Majority Leader.
Do you want to move, or do you? I'll move. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1164 and the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report.
To the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report. Representative Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an informal announcement. I know that there is a formal time to be removed for a bill, and that is after third reading. But I'm sorry to report that as a result of testimony that I heard in committee on this bill, I really feel that I can't support the policy side. I agreed to participate in the bill because as a former county clerk, I understand the administrative challenges of the variety of elections that we need to conduct. But as I got into being responsible for this bill, I realized there was just no way to avoid the policy reality that we were forcing our jurisdictions in our local governments to reject a requirement for jurisdictional residency. In other words, people can vote in an election in the jurisdiction for their mayor having lived in that jurisdiction for one day. And I realized that as a legislator, it's not my primary job to be concerned with administration, and as a county clerk, that was my job. So as a legislator, my job is policy-oriented. And because I fundamentally disagree with that policy, I have decided to get off the bill, and Majority Leader has been very gracious, and I truly apologize because I don't think this is a good thing for people to do, to get on a bill and then get off. But I was moved by testimony, and basically one of constituents said, don't take away our local control. And that's in effect what the bill does. And so I will be removing my name and won't be participating in the discussion. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on the committee report? Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will address this issue. First of all, I thank Representative Murray very much, but we will move forward in order to address the committee report, and then I will address some of the issues that Representative Murray raised in my introduction to the bill. So relative to the committee report, The amendments that were made in that committee report were primarily technical to make sure that we adjusted some of the language, some of the drafting errors, and we added to the bill language that was inadvertently left out in a couple of instances. Probably the most important one of those, that there were a couple of special districts that are county special districts, public improvement districts, and local improvement districts that were not included in the change for their code. And so we did that, and I asked for a yes vote on the committee report.
Is there further discussion on the committee report? Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, Representative Murray brought up a great point with one of the issues that we are having with this bill, and it actually is
To the committee report.
It is the committee report.
I don't think. I'm happy to take your comments.
This is the committee report.
Are you amending the committee
amending
report?
the committee report.
Okay. All right.
Just clarification, making sure we're doing it right. That's good. But one of the issues that we've had with this bill is that, well, I'll move it in a second. The fact that there is now a requirement that basically you do not have to live in a local jurisdiction to vote in that election. So this is striking out the requirement that you have to live there to vote. So with that, I move L008 and ask that it be displayed.
Amendment L008 has been moved and is properly displayed. To the amendment, Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And basically, what we're doing with this is we are putting back into language the requirement that you must live in this jurisdiction for 22 days to be able to vote in these local elections. So any political subdivision that can have an election will have a requirement that you have to live in that jurisdiction for 22 days to be able to vote. We don't feel that it's appropriate that you don't have to live there to actually vote. The problem that Representative Murray brought up, that if you want to vote for mayor in a jurisdiction, you basically don't have to live there to vote in that election. So I urge an aye vote, so our local municipalities and local jurisdictions can actually make sure that those are allowed to vote, or those that can vote there are doing so. So I urge an aye vote on L008.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will respectfully ask for a no vote on this amendment to the committee report. I want to remind you all, and this reflects in the amendment to the committee report, that we are doing this bill. I agreed to do this bill on behalf of the Special Districts Association and the municipalities, and in some instances the school districts. And they are fully in support of this bill, and they're fully in support of the residency requirements that were placed in this bill. As a matter of fact, they asked for that. I wasn't necessarily tied to that, but they were the ones that asked for it. And I'll give you some of the reasons that they asked to have this residency requirement placed here. The first one is that in past elections, and this has been many elections for decades, if you, in a special district election, if you are an individual who owns property in that district and are a registered voter in the state of Colorado, you can vote in those special district elections. And actually, they are the first ones under these circumstances that provide for same-day registration and voting. Because if you close on a piece of property on the same day as the election, you are entitled to vote. And as they reviewed this residency requirement, they came to the same conclusion in some instances that I did. One, it is administratively a nightmare to have two different standards for two different types of voters. But probably what is more compelling is that it's probably unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Law. If a registered elector has to meet more than 1 day requirement and a property owner who is a registered elector doesn't, that's an equal protection issue. So they were, for both administrative reasons and for constitutional reasons, anxious to get this, the residency of 22 days in the state, that standardized. So. The other argument that I have on this issue is that, say you move in the state of Colorado from Denver to Alamosa, and you have been a legal elector, and you move the day or two ahead of time or the same day, you have a right to vote because you're a registered elector. It makes no sense for you to drive back to Denver and vote in that election. It makes a whole lot more sense for you to be able to vote in your current election where you live. And quite frankly, that's where the interest lies. Why would somebody want to go vote in an election, particularly a special district election or a municipal election, for somebody that never will serve their interests? The goal here is for somebody to be able to vote on the election day, on issues that will impact their lives. And so I ask for a no vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L008? Representative Rankin.
Well, to my pleasure, I spent a lot of the summer participating in the Election Commission. We met about once a week, so I've learned an awful lot about elections and listened to a lot of citizens come and testify before that. And the one thing I want to point out about this residency requirement, it does make it easier to run elections in some case, but really all we need is one election where people come from outside and influence that election on election day, just one. And that'll be, that we will regret that we didn't go back to what's in the charter. The charter of most of these districts is 25 or 30 days. So we are changing what they have practiced over the years. So, to be safe, to run fair elections, we need to stand up for the voters, not just for the clerks and the people that run the elections, but the voters and the landowners in the state who participate in these elections. That's who I'm trying to look out for by standing in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment. Mr. Minority Leader.
Again, this bill strikes out the requirement that says that you have to live in the district for any stated period of time. The reality to think that if somebody's going to come in and vote for mayor, city council, any kind of a special district, and you don't have to live there, makes absolutely no sense that we're not going to require that. We're basically taking out of statute and making it 0 days. What is 0 days? I intend to live there. I hope to live there someday. To put something into statute that says simply, and Representative Hollinghurst brought up that you have to live for a day. What if we change it to 1 day? Would that be an amendment that would be acceptable, that you have to live in that district for 1 day? But no, not even 1 day. This bill is taking it to 0, that specifically states you don't have to live there. Now, one side says, yes, you have to live there, but when you take the requirement out of any kind of days, well, I just rolled into town, and so I'm physically in this town today, and so that means that I live here? What establishes that I have some kind of residency? That stuff is not in this bill. I think this is protection. This is making sure that we're not disenfranchising voters that are in that district by allowing people that don't live in the district to come in and vote and cancel out the votes of the people that actually live there? This is a sensible amendment to stop disenfranchisement of voters that live in these districts, and I urge an aye vote on L008.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I respectfully disagree with the esteemed minority leader on this issue. First of all, let me remind you again that the special districts and the municipalities are fully in support of changing the residency requirement as we have in this bill. And in the state, I will also explain to you that this in Colorado is an affidavit state, which means that when you go in to register and when you go in to vote, you sign an affidavit. You affirm that you are a legal, eligible registrant when you register. You affirm that you are legally registered to vote in the area where you get a ballot, so that would be in the district or the municipality in this case. And I'm just going to read the affidavit so that you understand that this is what people are sign when they do this. And it says, I affirm that I am a citizen of the United States. I have been a resident of the state of Colorado for at least 22 days. I am at least 16 years old and understand that I must be 18 years old to be eligible to vote. I meet the registration qualifications, and the information I have provided on this application is true to the best of my knowledge and belief, and I further affirm that I will not cast more than one ballot in any election. I am aware that if I register to vote in Colorado, I am also considered a resident of Colorado for motor vehicle registration and operation purposes and for income tax purposes. I further affirm that my present address as stated herein is my sole legal place of residence and that I claim no other place as my legal residence. That is what you sign when you vote. And if you commit fraud in that regard, that is a felony. And you, in the way they set up elections in these places, they have the ability to go back and check. If they are online, they can check immediately to find out if your address is legitimate and if, in fact, you have voted in another place. So we are very adequately protected, as we argued ad infinitum last year, to ensure that people vote legally. The idea of people coming into a district and voting illegally is a figment of someone's imagination. It has occurred very infrequently, and when it has occurred, it's generally speaking because somebody's made a mistake. They don't do why in the world would you do this intentionally when you're subject to a felony? And what we are doing here is trying to protect everybody's right to vote. Now, there was a big stunt that was pulled in this state with the recall election. I call it a one-man circus act. That attempted to prove that somehow there was a problem with the residency requirement. And what that person did is they lawyered up. They actually leased a place from a friend so they could use that address. And when that person went to vote, they made it very clear that they didn't fill out the ballot and they didn't vote anywhere else. Well, the Attorney General couldn't find enough evidence to charge that person with a felony because there was no actual vote, and he actually had spent a lot of money to hire a lot of lawyers and to have a residency where he registered. That is not reality. That is not reality in the state of Colorado. That is a figment of somebody's imagination. It's a circus act, and I absolutely disagree that our residency requirements aren't fully supported by legal statute and that they can be enforced. I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Mr. Minority Leader. Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I adamantly disagree with our esteemed Majority Leader. I do agree that fraud is still against the law, and voter fraud would still be against the law, but there is a new premise here. There are 7 magic words. Those 7 magic words are, I intend to live in the district. I intend to live in the district. Those 7 words provides a real live ballot to anyone who's willing to say those 7 words. In talking with voters in Douglas County over the interim and looking back at 1303, we heard exclamations of this can't be right. They would get a provisional ballot, right? No. Anyone who is willing to say those 7 words gets a live ballot. Their vote counts. They can do that at 6:59 p.m. on what we used to call Election Day, which is now not Election Day. It's just the deadline of a 3-week mail ballot process. But anyone can walk in and say, I intend to live in the district. They don't show photo ID. They don't prove citizenship. They fill out a form and provide a name and an address, no social security number, no fingerprint. I intend to live in the district. Well, what if we find out that after they vote and their vote counts, that they didn't live in the district, that they don't live in the district? Well, to take that person into a court and challenge their intent is not possible. How do you challenge someone's words that they say they intended to, and then, gosh, something came up and they didn't actually do that? They didn't actually move into the district. The rent negotiations fell through. The sales contract on their house went backwards. The job didn't come through. Whatever the reason, but we can't go back and say that person offered a false statement because it's based on intent. And unless we had some way to catch that person admitting their guilt, we have no way to prove that. So what does that mean? It means that any resident of the state of Colorado for more than 30 days, if he or she believes that the ends justify the means, anyone who has a motivation, we say whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting, anybody who might have a motivation on a special district that deals with water, anyone who might have a motivation against the agenda, the positions of a school district, can walk into the county clerk's office and say, I intend to live in this district, and they receive a live ballot and they vote in that election, and that vote can't really be challenged because it's based on intent. I'm shocked that the special districts are in support of this bill. I'm shocked that school districts aren't here raising their hand and saying, wait a minute, this bill without amendment allows a person who's never paid property taxes either through rent or property ownership, who comes into the county clerk's office and proclaims those magic 7 words, I intend to live in the district. I'm shocked that those districts are not here saying, wait a minute, this isn't what we thought it was. I can understand if there's a residency requirement in that district, but this is based on being a resident of the state and choosing where you want to vote. Recognize also that there is no proof of identification. There is no proof of citizenship. And if a person offers false information along with those magic 7 words, how do we find them? How do we ever go back and challenge that they committed voter fraud? I ask for an aye vote on the amendment.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wouldn't be so shocked, Representative Holbert, that the special districts at CML support this bill, because they don't live in a world of imaginary courts that don't take a look at the entire statute when they make their determinations. They look at everything. They take a look at the word intent, and then they follow that up with what the rest of the statute says. Can't be that you just intend to live someplace. You have to have physical presence in where you live. That's the other part of the statute. So if we were to actually read the entire statute, you'll see that intent is also followed up by having a principal or primary home or place of abode of a person. And what determines what a principal or primary place of an abode of a person is also in statute, just in case you wanted to battle against that one. The following circumstances relating to the person shall be taken into account: the business pursuits, employment, income sources, resident for income or other tax purposes, age, marital status, residence of parents, spouse or civil union partner, and children if any, leasehold, status of personal and real estate or real property, existence of any other residence, and the amount of time at each residence, and motor vehicle registration. So it isn't that someone says, as with the one-man circus, I intend to live someplace, where I guess even the Attorney General found that to be suspect. In this particular situation, they have actually need to live there. So this motion is just part of the circus. And I ask for a no vote. Thank you.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, a lot of you don't know my history because you're relatively new to this chamber. I have worked with the County Commissioners, CCI, and the Special District Association, SDA, and the county clerks for over 20 years on a variety of issues. I know these people. I know they understand their jobs. They understand what they need to do their jobs. So I trust their opinions. They didn't ask for this amendment. They asked for this bill as introduced. I know these people. They know what they're doing. This is not their amendment. The bill is their bill. SDA, CCI, the county clerks all want this bill, not this amendment. Please vote no on this amendment.
Mr. Minority Leader.
All right, so there's been several things that I would like to address. So first, currently the bill says you have to live in the state of Colorado for 22 days. So we already have a residency requirement for the state. So I've been asked, where do we come up with 22 days? Where are we coming up with that? This aligns with what the state requirement is. So to say if you have to live in the state of Colorado for 22 days, now we're also saying that you have to live in that local jurisdiction for 22 days as well for you to vote. And as Representative Salazar pointed out, the fact that you fill out the affidavit that says I intend to live here, here's my address. But what also currently happens is the clerk will take that, look at the address that you put down that you were where you live, and verify that it's not McDonald's or somewhere else that's out there, an address that you made up, and send a card that says you registered to vote at this address, and then they get a bounce back. And that's how they verify that you are actually living at the residency that you actually put down that says I live at, when you fill out the I intend to live at this address. And this is taking out that check that the clerks have to verify. So right now, Representative Salazar is right that they fill out the form, but there is no way to check that the address that they put down on that form is correct. There is no way to confirm that what you put down is the right address. That is the problem. There's nothing wrong with conforming local jurisdiction requirements to the same that we require for you to be a state resident for 22 days. And yes, I'm not on the State Affairs Committee, so I didn't sit through all 3 hours of the testimony. We did hear the local jurisdictions come in and testify in favor of the bill, but the reality is they're being strong-armed by the state of Colorado. The state of Colorado put a law into place that basically rammed through last year without their input. And now they are forced to say, look, what you put into law doesn't work for our local districts. And we have no alternative but to come down here and try to conform to the state law, which we did not have input on. I'm pretty sure nobody came down, at least I didn't listen to all 3 hours of testimony, and so maybe I missed it, and some of that they spoke and some of it that I didn't hear. But I didn't hear any of them that gladly came in and said, you know what, this residency requirement has been so burdensome for us in the past to conduct our elections. We need to get rid of this what we have to verify that people live here. This is a great thing that we can no longer check to make sure that somebody lives in these jurisdictions. Now, maybe they did testify to that and I missed that, but I never heard that. So there is the 22 days, which simply aligns with what we say. You have to be a resident of the state of Colorado for 22 days. We're aligning with what we require at the local's jurisdiction with 22 days as well. It's a common sense amendment, and I urge an aye vote.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I have to disagree again. I will tell you that I have listened to the special districts and to the Municipal League for a very long time on this bill. This bill is brought on their behalf so that they don't have to follow all of the state very involved standards for general elections that we now have to have in this state. And that actually has been a situation that has been developing for many, many years. It doesn't relate just to House Bill 1303 that was passed last year. It relates to the general amendment for many years of the Uniform Election Code of 1992. And granted, I think 1303 highlighted it, but they have been wanting to make changes like this for quite a long time. What we are doing in this bill is we are moving the election code to a large extent, and that's why you see all of the pages with the capitalization. We are moving the municipal election code into a special area of the statute for the special districts. Their election code was found in several different places and was very confusing. We're clarifying that for them so they can run their own local elections according to the way they have to run those elections. On the other hand, this was at their request, and I emphasize that at their request, we have had inconsistencies with registration requirements for quite some time in the statute, and they have created huge confusion for both the voters and for those folks in the special districts and the municipalities that had those different registration requirements from the state. They caused a lot of confusion. So this was one of the main things that they requested be placed in this bill to standardize that across the board so there would be no confusion for the voter and so that they could be much more easily administered. So there was no strong arming going on here, except they're asking me to please put these provisions in the bill, which I was very happy to do.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as I hear the arguments for this amendment from my friends on this side of the aisle, in essence, what they're arguing for is taxation without representation, which to me is startling and defies what we have been trying to do throughout our history, is to give taxpayers the right to vote on their taxes. Essentially what this amendment does, just so that everyone's clear about what the logical conclusions of adding this amendment would be, is if you're in a special district and you want a person who is a Colorado registered elector and who owns land in one of these taxing districts, that they be able to vote on any new tax that's levied in that district. According to my friends on this side of the aisle, that is not something they want to allow, and essentially, again, let me say this, taxation without representation. We've already done this in our history. There's no reason we should be repeating history. And at the end of the day, when we're arguing against disenfranchising taxpayers, when we're arguing that we should not allow them to vote on their taxes, that is the wrong direction we want to go in Colorado. I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree, we want taxpayers absolutely to have a right to vote when it comes to taxes. But there's no protection in this legislation that requires that somebody show that they actually are the landowner, or they don't come in with a deed. Even if it's stamped that day, the day of the election, something in this should be shown that say, I have a deed, I am authorized to vote here because I own land and the taxation is going to affect me. That's not in here. Instead, what is in here is anybody can show up to vote who says they have the intent of living in the district. And that could be somebody who doesn't own land, rents a property across some other district. And it doesn't go to what I think was spoken before here, that the intent here is to, if the intent here is to, hey, let's make sure the taxpayers have the right for their voice to be heard, then let's put that in here to show that the taxpayer is actually the taxpayer who is voting. And in cases of issues when it comes to land, because of taxation issues, that they are verified, that they are the deed owner, even if that deed is stamped that particular day. This amendment, which we're speaking to now, only asks for 22 days. That's not burdensome, and it's that balance. And we're finding that that burden is not 22 days. The state agreed last year when the majority of this chamber passed the bill saying that 22 days was a good number. That's a good number for special districts too, and I ask for a yes vote on this.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to address a, how should I put it, a made-up controversy where they said that the state made the special districts bring this bill. Remember last year we had that debate on Jedi mind tricks and mind melding? I'm going to try it with this because I want to see how powerful we are as a state to get CML to move this bill. It's not happening, right? Thank you very much for considering us to have so much power, but we didn't do this. CML did it. The special districts did it. The state didn't ask them to move this bill. It was them who said, our constituents are concerned. Please move this forward. That way we can have some consistency. It wasn't Jedi mind tricks, folks, and it wasn't mind melding either. It was, we listened to our constituents. You should too. I vote no on this amendment.
The force is not with Representative Salazar. Mr. Minority Leader.
You know, how do you follow something up like that by just saying, wow, that. And there again, you know, 3 hours of testimony. I wasn't in the committee, so I didn't listen to the whole thing. And maybe Representative Salazar heard the special districts come in and say, if you would have not passed 1303 last year, the bill that you see before us would be here in this exact form. Maybe they said that, but I'm pretty sure they didn't say that. So as a result of us passing legislation last year, caused them to have to bring legislation this year. So I don't, in the form that it's at. So I don't think that any of the special districts or any of the local municipalities or CML came in and said, you know, it has nothing to do with the bill that you passed last year. The bill that you see before you today would be in its exact same current form. But that is not true. That would have not happened. So the coming down and trying to make a spectacle of Jedi mind tricks or whatever, the reality is if we pass a law and it forces somebody else to have to do something else, that is not a mind trick. That is a strong arm tactic. And that is exactly what we have done down here at the legislature, and that is a reason why we see the bill in its form before us. And Representative Pabone's comments about taxation without representation is, I won't say it's one of the most absurd things I've heard here, but the reality is, what about that taxpayer that actually lives there and has somebody come in and vote that does not live there? They have just canceled out that taxpayer's vote. What about that person? But Representative Pabone doesn't seem to care about that person. I urge an aye vote on this common sense piece of on this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I sat on the State Affairs Committee during this debate and specifically asked the questions of CML and SDA when they were sitting there of why are we doing this now? What is the rush to do this legislation? Because there seems to be some time. And they said, well, because 1303 was passed last year, because elections were coming up in April and May, this had to be done now. They didn't want to have to do this as fast and in a sort of blind manner as we're doing it, but because last year 1303 was passed, they said they had to be there to get this done before their next elections. And when asked about the residency requirement, they didn't want to deal with that, but that was part of 1303, and they wanted and they felt had to be done in this legislation. So, Representative Salazar, I was sitting in the same committee as you and remember them answering the question of this was due to 1303 is why we were there today or a couple days ago and why it had to be done so fast. And so I think it's disingenuous, maybe too much Jedi mind tricks going on, clogging your memory of what happened just a couple days ago at the hearing.
Representative Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, to some extent, I think the debate's being couched in the wrong direction here. We're not, by this amendment, we are not taking away anybody's right to vote. There's always been in these charters for these districts, there's always been a number of days that you have to live in the district. And there's always been a provision that if you buy land, and, if you move into the district and you can prove you're a resident and you buy land there, you can vote. So we're not removing anybody's right to vote or accessibility to the ballot, in my mind. I think that, what we are doing is taking on a risk of potential fraud, a potential violation of the affidavit. So that's what we really have to think about. What are we gaining by taking on this additional risk? I mean, tell me what we actually are gaining by running a bill with 0 days residency. That's really the issue that hits me on this, and so I'd like to hear that.
Members, I've been generous with the debate. The question before us is Amendment L008, not previous bills passed by this chamber. Is there further discussion on Amendment L008? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Amendment L008. All those in favor say aye. Aye! Opposed, no. No! Amendment L008 is lost. To the State Affairs Committee report. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask for a yes vote on the committee report.
Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L012. Ask that it be displayed.
Amendment L012 has been moved and is properly displayed. To the amendment, Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. L012 would amend page 53 of the bill and strike lines 23 and substitute the words, "The voting system is certified by the Secretary of State prior to the election." Ask that we allow our chief elections supervisor, the Secretary of State, to verify that the election systems used in these elections work appropriately and that the voters can rely on the outcome. Ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L012? Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask for a no vote on this amendment. This is the kind of thing that we're trying to address in this bill. It would be a terrible burden on some special districts. You have special districts in this state that have, 5, 10 members in them. They are businesses, many of them. These are very small municipalities who have run elections for decades under the codes that they have in the election code. This bill is consolidating that and clarifying it so that they don't have to abide by certification at the state level. That's anti-local control. This bill supports local control. It supports local businesses. I should emphasize that. These are people who have special districts for purposes of infrastructure and other things like that that are very important. It's one of the reasons we're moving this bill quickly if we can, so that they can conduct their elections in May. This is exactly opposite of what we are trying to do with this bill, and I ask for a no vote.
Further discussion on Amendment L012. Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Amendment L012. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Amendment L012 is lost. Is there further discussion on the State Affairs Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of the State Affairs Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. The State Affairs Committee report passes. To the bill, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I would like to thank Representative Murray for working with me on this bill and for being, for at least a while, a co-prime sponsor with me on this. I regret that it didn't work out. She was instrumental in crafting some of the compromises that we had in this bill and working with the special districts and the municipalities. And so I just want to thank her for that and say I'm sorry that it's come to this, but sometimes we just have policy disagreements, and I understand that's exactly what this is. To the bill, House Bill 1164 creates an election code for special districts based on the municipal election code called the MEC. That's in Article 10 of Title 31, which has served Colorado cities and towns well for decades. The necessity to readopt the MEC adapted for special district elections accounts for most of the pages of uppercase type you see in this bill. And I want to emphasize that because I always have great fear when I carry a bill that transfers a lot of law from one section to the other. And that's what we're doing from about page 20 or so on. There are a few changes there, but that's all existing law. And one of the issues that we've had as we move through the testimony on this bill in committee, and I hear it from some of you some of the time, well, this is a terrible provision. I think we should change that. Well, what you have to remember is that that's been in the law for 20, 40, 60 years sometimes. So my suggestion to you on that, if you want to change something that is existing code for the municipalities that's now being transferred in a special place for the special districts, so they have it all in one spot, and it's primarily the municipal code with adaptations for special districts that's moving into a new section of the law. Think of doing another bill on that, because we really need to get this bill done, which I believe very strongly is in very good shape for the special districts and the municipalities like statutory towns who have their election in April, for them to be able to abide by this election code. As a part of the election code for the districts and in the MEC as well, the bill adopts mail ballot procedures based on the state mail ballot law, under which districts and municipalities have also operated for years. And as we have discussed at length, it standardizes the residency requirement for registration and voting. To bring the code in conformity with the Uniform Voting Code of 1992 as it was amended last year. It also clarifies, although it has been fairly clear in the statute, when you run what is defined as a coordinated campaign with the county clerk, which municipalities, a lot of the larger ones, and special districts, generally speaking, the larger ones, can do, and school districts can do. Many school districts do this. So if you pass a resolution and you cooperate with the county clerk in a coordinated election, all of those elections are according to the Uniform Election Code of 1992. And that was the amendment that went, the 1303 was the amendment that went into that last year. So I hope that that clarifies all of this. There's been, in my opinion, a lot of misunderstanding and a significant amount of misinformation on this bill. And I understand when you move a lot of code that that's what happens. But it, in my opinion, is a very good bill. I'm proud to sponsor it on behalf of the Municipal League, the special districts, and the school districts, and I ask for a yes vote.
Members, it's getting a tad loud. If you can keep your voices just a little lower. Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now that we're past the committee report, let's get back to what we were talking about before and the residency requirements. Let's put Representative Salazar to the test, and I move L002 and ask that it be displayed.
Amendment L002 has been moved and is displayed to the amendment. Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, if you would please turn to page 101 of this behemoth of a bill and take a look at lines 10 through 18. This is the existing residency requirement to vote in a school district election. Long-held statute, existing statute in Colorado. In this chamber and across the way, and the governor at the time decided that property owners and people who rent and pay property taxes through their rent should live in a school district for at least 25 days to be eligible in a school district election. So if you want to make the case that you have to be a resident of that district, either a property owner or a renter, you have to live in someone's home, you have to have an address there in the district, then let's keep that in existing statute. This is not some extreme move. This is just what we do right now. Now, last year, our county clerk looked at this and put out a memo that, yes, if you want to come in and register to vote in the odd year election and you want to vote, for instance, on Amendment 66, you can do that. But if you want to vote in the school board election, you need to show that you have lived in the county for 25 days. Now, why is that a good idea? There's another reason that's a good idea. It was addressed earlier. An address is provided. The county clerk can send a postcard out to that address and verify that that person actually lives there. But without this amendment, those magic 7 words trump everything. I intend to live in the district. And the clerk hands over a ballot, live ballot, not provisional, and that vote counts. If for some reason, if some way after the election is completed, the county clerk discovers that that person doesn't live at the address, there's nothing that can be done. We would be questioning the statement of intent. Something changed. Totally out of the control of the voter, or maybe it was completely made up, but it's all based on that intent statement. So I ask for a yes vote on L002. Let's uphold current law and require that someone who wants to vote in a school district election, remember school districts rely on one specific form of taxation. Representative Pabon talked about taxation without representation. Let's make sure we don't have representation without taxation. The 25-day requirement allows our county clerks to verify that a person wanting to vote in our school district elections is actually a taxpayer in that district, and I ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L002? Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask for a no vote on this amendment. This goes to what we have just discussed for quite a long time in terms of residency. It also goes to what we debated for quite a long time last year in many respects. And I absolutely disagree with this. Quite frankly, if you have representation without taxation, that means you're an average citizen voting in an election. It's patently unconstitutional to relate voting to taxation. If you are a property owner in a district, you have a right to vote. But we don't say if you don't have property in that district that you don't have a right to vote. That is an unconstitutional policy in this state and in the nation. So I believe we've debated this. We need to not go further with this concept. We are an affidavit state. If we want to change that, we need to change our election code. That would not be a proper amendment under this title.
Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think it's pretty obvious that the reason that we have long debate last year, in committee this year, and here on the floor today is that this is a debatable issue. There's two sides to this argument. One side continues to downplay the notion that, oh no, there's nothing to see here, move along, everything's just fine. But this principle of whether it's taxation without representation or the other way around, what we're trying to avoid here is someone who's paying property taxes in a different district affecting the outcome of election in a district in which they actually don't live. And I ask everyone in the chamber and those listening online and by television that the standard in the bill as it exists right now without this amendment for school district elections is any resident of the state of Colorado who disagrees with the agenda of a school district, all they have to be willing to do is accept that the ends justify the means, walk into that county clerk's office and say those magic 7 words, I intend to live in the district. Then they fill out a piece of paper that provides an address. We don't have time to verify that if it's the last day of that 3-week cycle. If it's at 6:59 p.m. on so-called election day, there's nothing that the clerk can do to verify that. And once it's 7 o'clock and the polls are closed, that vote counts. So let's allow our county clerks and our school districts to verify that the people who are voting in our 178 school district elections actually live in those districts, either as a property owner or a renter. Let's actually make sure that they live there rather than have people from other districts, other taxation models going into a district and offering those magic 7 words and voting in an election in which they have no right to do so.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L002? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Amendment L002. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Amendment L002 is lost. To the bill. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam, or Mr. Chair. I beg your pardon. I ask for a yes vote.
Madam Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, the process of voting is an issue of integrity of the process. If we don't have integrity of the process, elections don't matter. And I know in this country, we fought to get a lot of different individuals who were not eligible to vote, to have the right to vote. And that's important to the process of elections in this great country we live in. Many countries don't have this great process. And I think sometimes we take it for granted. But at the core of the election process, we must make sure that integrity prevails in the process. I'm bringing a common sense amendment that I think we should all be able to agree on. I move L014 and ask that it be displayed, please.
Amendment L014 has been moved and is properly displayed. To the amendment, Madam Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, what this amendment says is, if you're a resident of the state of Colorado, and you have been for the 22 days, and you want to vote in a special election, and you go in and you're not on the list, or you don't prove that you're part of that area, you receive a provisional ballot. If we would have been able to get this small common sense amendment on 1303, I don't know that we would have had all the hoopla that's going on and has been going on over the past year. It's really something that I believe we should all agree on to make sure that the process and the right to vote that we've so fought for stays intact. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L014, Madam Majority Leader?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I ask for a no vote on this amendment. This is exactly the kind of thing that the special districts and the other local governments involved here want to avoid. Provisional ballots are very, very expensive for them to operate. They can cost from $1 to $3 a ballot just to get them done and counted and voted. And it really, I think it can be argued it interferes with people's voting rights too, because you don't get those votes counted for a while. And I want to say this about the election code here. As I said, the special districts and the municipalities have been operating under this election code for many, many years. They are very interested in the integrity of the ballot. And I can't tell you how important it is for some special districts that are going to be bonding based on an election. They want to make sure that election cannot be contested. They work very hard to protect the integrity of voting. They believe that the way we have dealt with the residency requirement in this bill is better than they had it before, and they were the ones that wanted this placed in the bill. I will not argue with them. I know that they've run elections for decades without huge problems, and I ask for a no vote.
Madam Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first comment is, are we serious? We're not willing to spend a few more dollars to protect the integrity of the process? Actually, what is in 1303 is very expensive, and we are going to find that out because it's going to trigger many, many lawsuits. And we all know when a lawsuit comes about, that is very expensive. I think this provision that's in L014 will prevent a lot of those lawsuits. And I think it's in the best interest of the integrity of the system that we make sure that the people that are actually in the district and can prove they are by whatever means know that others aren't going to move in and override their vote. The next thing is, you know what? I think the clerks do a great job. I think we all here do a great job in fighting for who our constituents are and all of those things. But that's not always what it's about. It's not always about one group. The voters in elections should count, not just the people running the system. They all should count. This amendment would make sure that they all count. I have heard from other clerks that this is going to be a tough one. So she's heard from some of them that they want to keep it the way it is. I've heard from some that they don't really like the way it is. So that's a moot point at that point. As for taking away voting privileges from people, whatever you want to call it, this doesn't do it. A provisional ballot counts. And unless it's a runaway election, every one of those gets counted. But in order to bring forth a ballot, we need to make sure, for one, you're the person you say you are, and for two, you have the right to vote in that district that you live in. Colleagues, this is a common sense amendment. None of you should be against it. I ask for an aye vote on L014.
Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I rise in support of L014. The argument that the most expensive, least effective, and most complicated problem-solving engine we have, government, the argument that government, whether it's a special district or a municipality or a school district, can't be burdened with the expensive inconvenience of verifying that a voter is eligible to vote in an election is absurd. Voters in this state recognize what's happening at the state and federal level. We spend more and more money every year, and the very integrity of our election process, the process by which we determine who will represent us in this representative republic, how we will be taxed or not, that process, that integrity of that process is in question here. And the argument against L014 is that it will cost too much. I ask for an aye vote on L014.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L014? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Amendment L014. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Amendment L014 is lost. To the bill, Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move L011. Ask that it be displayed.
Amendment L011 has been moved and is displayed. To the amendment, Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe on line 3 there might be a space missing. It looks like we have a new word there, no, notwithstanding. But the intent of this amendment is to, again, allow the Secretary of State to have jurisdiction to oversee these local elections so that we have that chief elections officer of our state, elected statewide, regardless of party affiliation. That person, he or she, has the responsibility to manage and oversee our elections. Ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L011? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Amendment L011. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Amendment L011 is lost. Is there further discussion on House Bill 1164? Representative Humphrey.
Thank you. I'm just concerned that our service members who we honored just recently always get a ballot and be able to vote. I'll let you take a look at this amendment. I move Amendment L009 and ask that it be displayed. You don't have it?
Amendment L009 has been moved and is displayed. To Amendment L009, Representative Humphrey.
Thank you. This amendment would require that our service members would receive a mail-in ballot. That's not required in the bill as you have it before you. they can already request to be a permanent absentee voter. I realize that, but for whatever reason, if they're not, if they're a new voter or whatnot, we don't want to cause these service members to be excluded, and ask for a yes vote on the amendment.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L009? Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask for a no vote. There is provision in this in the code for special districts and for the municipalities to provide for absentee voting, and they do that, and they will do that for military people, and there are requirements in the code for that. This is another one of those issues that has been handled very well by the special districts and the municipalities. If we need amendments to that area, I suggest we do it in another bill. I ask for a no vote.
Representative Nordberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, if you are a member of the Armed Forces and you fall under the Uniform Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, you should not have to contact every special district you're in to receive a mail ballot. That's unacceptable. Let's pass this. This is common sense. The El Paso County Clerk and Recorder mentioned that this would be a huge issue, especially given our population with 5 major military installations in Colorado Springs. I'd ask for a yes vote on this amendment.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L009? Representative Humphrey.
Thank you. I would just add to what Representative Nordberg just said, that it's easy to not know what special district you are. It's easy to be confused about those things, especially if you've recently moved or whatnot. So I think it's an important amendment, and I'd appreciate a yes vote on it. It doesn't seem to me to be too controversial, so thank you.
Further discussion on Amendment L009? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Amendment L009. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Amendment L009 is lost. Is there further discussion? Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another issue that folks inside and outside the building who were watching this bill had a concern about was verification of signatures. I'm grateful to the drafter and working with people who had concerns about this bill. And I have Amendment L013, but unfortunately it's a multi-page amendment. So I can't move it, I can't discuss the amendment because it's multi-page. I would ask the chair, given your discretion, the majority leader, could we at least move the amendment so that we could make those constituents' concerns a part of the discussion?
The committee will stand in a brief recess while we consider if Amendment L013 is in order. The committee will come back to order. The chair rules that Amendment L013 is in order. Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I offer my gratitude to you as chairman and also the majority leader, the rest of the majority members who were involved in the discussion with that tolerance, with that approval. I move L013 and ask that it be displayed.
Amendment L013 has been moved and is displayed. Members, this is a multi-page amendment, just so you're aware. Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, the subject here is verification of signature rules. This is one place that we actually do have the ability, the technology to verify who an elector, who a voter actually is. I have started to hear from others, not necessarily just in my county or my party, that now that we're allowing so much flexibility, same-day voter registration, immediate access to live ballots, maybe now is a time that we need to look more at technology and verifying that a person is, in fact, who he or she says they are. He or she says they are. Amendment L013 would help shore up the signature verification process. It would help I believe, the county clerks and the Secretary of State in determining when there is someone misrepresenting their identity, trying to vote on behalf of some other voter, or potentially voting multiple times in the same election process. That may not occur in the same district, which is a particular concern now with 1303 last year and 1164 this year, assuming that this bill becomes law. We are providing such immediate access that a person who is so motivated could easily vote in multiple districts on election day, that last day, and there's no time to catch that. So it really is a determination of how far an individual is willing to go to push that law. I trust that most voters would not do such things, but to suggest that no one would do such things, and it's just frankly against the law, so it won't happen, I think that is turning a blind eye to a very real problem, potential problem, and that is that people would dilute the vote of a legitimate voter in a district by voting in multiple districts multiple times in an election. Ask for an aye vote, and thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for your discretion.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, we just spent better part of the morning going over the arguments of my friends on the other side of the aisle saying that they were opposed to this bill because of the state imposing its will upon local control. That's exactly what this amendment does. It imposes state power upon local control, and the municipalities as well as the special districts, they opposed this onerous requirement. Not only that, but let's also remember too that when we talked about verification of signatures in committee, that the municipalities verified with us that this Secretary of State doesn't even give them full access to score. So how can they verify anything when this Secretary of State doesn't give them access to score? That being the case, I ask for a no vote on this amendment L013.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L013, Representative Rankin?
Well, actually, you, without access to score, you can ask for a file from the county clerk on these signatures. I was hoping that this bill would do a lot to clean up a number of things in the municipal code. It's not that, it literally just separates it from 1303 and leaves a lot of things in place. I've been very concerned about signatures across the board. There's a vast discrepancy in how people verify signatures. It ought to be in all of our best interests, bipartisan, to work on certain aspects of elections that actually verify that people are really who they say they are, to give confidence in the integrity of our election system. Verifying signatures is really at the heart of that. It would be ideal if they had access to score, but they can request a file of those signatures and do a better job of this. Believe me, I've talked to a lot of these people. The way people verify signatures varies dramatically, and it's something we ought to fix in the whole election code, not just this bill. Thank you.
Representative Wrighton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as chair of the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, I was in the hearing the other day. And what we heard was that this was not a last-minute bill. This was not a hurry up and write it at the last minute kind of bill. This bill has been in the works since last summer. But guess what? We were not in session last summer. We were not in session last fall. We started our session in January. This is the first opportunity that our special districts and our municipal league have had to bring this before us. I would say that this bill had a lot of thought and a lot of work that went into it, and I guess I object to having a two-page amendment at the last minute. And I would say that this is something that members just say no to this amendment.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L013? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Amendment L013. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Amendment L013 is lost. Is there further discussion on House Bill 1164? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1164. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. House Bill 1164 passes. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
Seeing no objection, the committee will rise and report.
The House will come back to order. Mr. Kohler, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, Committee of the Whole begs leave to report as under consideration of the following attached bills being second reading thereof and makes the following recommendations thereon. House Bills 1005 amended, 1164 amended, passed on second reading, or gross placed on the calendar for third reading, final passage.
Representative Rosenthal, that'll be at $2 for coat rule. I think Representative Waller is going to pay your fine. Representative Moreno. You've heard the motion. There are amendments at the desk. I'm looking. Hold on one second, sir. Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under Rule 21C, I ask that I be excused from all recorded votes on House Bill 1164.
Representative McNulty be excused under House Rule 21C. Mr. Kohler, please read the DELGROSSO amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Representative DELGROSSO moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken by the committee in not adopting the following DELGROSSO Amendment L008 to House Bill 1164 to show that said amendment passed and that House Bill 1164 as amended passed.
Representative, Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this was the common sense amendment that was brought forward a little bit ago that basically said that to vote in a special election or a special district or any kind of a local election, you actually have to live there. That seems pretty common sense to me. So I urge an aye vote on the DELGROSSO amendment to the Committee of the Whole.
Any other discussion? Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for a no vote based on my arguments before.
You've heard the motion. Sorry. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before the House is the adoption of the DELGROSSO amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Humphrey, Murray, Pedersen. Representative Pedersen. Close the machine. With 27 aye votes, 36 no votes, 2 excused, and 0 absent, the report, the DELGROSSO amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole is lost. Mr. Kohler, please read the Humphrey and Nordberg amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Representatives Humphrey and Nordberg move to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken by the committee in not adopting the following Humphrey Amendment L009 to House Bill 1164 to show that said amendment passed and that House Bill 1164 as amended passed.
Representative Nordberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the Humphrey-Nordberg amendment to the Committee of the Whole.
To the amendment.
Members, this is just as we discussed previously during debate. If you're a member of the armed forces, you should not be required to contact every special district in your residence back home while you're serving in Afghanistan or Iraq. It's completely unacceptable. This is not a political amendment. This is pretty much just saying you should not have to contact every special district, which in certain constituencies can be several. So I'd ask for a yes vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also ask for a yes vote on this amendment. Checked with the special districts. It's going in their article for their code. And while they have provision to do this already, this is belt and suspenders. They have no objection to adding it. Neither do I. I ask for a yes vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the House is the adoption of the Humphrey and Nordberg amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buckner, Humphrey, Priola. Close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 0 no votes, 2 excused, and 0 absent, the Nordberg-Humphrey amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. Mr. Kohler, please read the Holbert amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Representative Holbert moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken by the committee in not adopting the following Holbert Amendment L013 to House Bill 1164 to show that said amendment passed and that House Bill 1164 as amended passed.
Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I do ask for a aye vote. Let's keep the spirit of bipartisanship going. Congratulations to Representative Norberg and Humphrey. This goes back to the signature verification. I do very much appreciate the chairman and the majority leader allowing the amendment to come forth, but signature verification and the technology that we have available today is going to become increasingly important as we move more towards efficient access to live ballots. Whether it's a driver's license and a photo ID, or maybe turning that around and actually taking a photograph of the person when they walk in, or better technology, better structure, sideboards, if you will, on signature verification. Something needs to allow the integrity in all of our elections, and ask for an aye vote.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I ask for a no vote on this amendment to the Committee of the Whole. We already argued that this is an imposition on local control with regard to elections, the exact thing that we were trying to address in this bill. But in addition to that, I would just point out that the special districts and the municipalities have accepted absentee ballots and permanent absentee ballots for years, and there has been no problem with that, and they have a very good way of dealing with it in those instances. However, I think that this is an issue that will be an increasingly interesting issue as we move forward on in the election code, and I wouldn't object to having someone address it in a way that I believe is workable for the special districts and for the municipalities in another bill. It will take some research and some work and some probably direction to the Secretary of State to make it happen. But in this instance, in this bill, I ask for a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the House is the Holbert Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Lebsack and Rosen, close the machine. With 26 aye votes, 37 no votes, 2 excused, and 0 absent, the Holbert Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole is lost. There are no further amendments at the desk. Question before the House is the adoption of the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives McCann, Stevens, and Szabo. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Members, I do have one announcement. Friday is relaxed dress if you are wearing Broncos gear. So Friday we will, what? Jeans are acceptable as long as you're wearing Broncos. Representative Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans, we are having our first caucus lunch today, so don't forget to join us in room 111. We'll be having Qdoba, and it should be a good time to be had by all. Thanks.
Representative Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Transportation Committee members, listen up, please. We're changing the order of the bills today a little bit. House Bill 1056 by Holbert will go first. House Bill 1101 by Tyler will go second, and to allow a full discussion, House Bill 1067 Conti will be third. 1056 first, 1101 second, 1067 third. Thank you.
Representative Ryden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members of the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. We will be meeting on adjournment. So in about 10 minutes over in LSB, we have 2 bills up this morning. Thank you.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Local Government will be meeting at 1:30, just as it says on your calendar, room 107. Some hot issues today. We've got the sunset review on fire suppression registration, as well as Representative Foote's bill on the firefighter pension boards. And last, we'll be looking at House Bill 1132. Look forward to seeing you at 1:30 sharp.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources Committee, we will meet, I'll drop the gavel at 11:15 sharp, so please be down there ready to work. Hopefully we won't have to work through lunch, but we may. So be down there at 11:15. Thanks.
Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House Education Committee, we are also meeting upon adjournment with the Senate. Because of our schedule here this morning, the Senate is hearing a bill. I need to figure out where they are, but we will meet down in our usual place at 11:15, and hopefully we'll be able to expedite our presentations this morning with the State Land Board and the BEST program so that we are finished by noon. We'll see how that goes, so I'll see you down there.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Regardless of how long you go at your upon adjournment afternoon Finance Committee, we will be meeting at 1:30, and we have 5 bills on the agenda over at LSB. Thank you.
Any further announcements or introductions? Seeing none, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 1 o'clock this afternoon, at which point we will adjourn until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess till 1 p.m.